G'day everyone, welcome back to Luke's Way of Looking. Today in Maya we're going to be looking at creating our first 3D printable object using the sphere polygon primitive. Alrighty, to kick things off, we are going to go up to our tool shelf and click on sphere. I'm going to turn on anti-aliasing. And for this episode, I'm also going to disable the grid, which is another button up here in the viewport, just to make things a little bit easier to look at. In the last video, we discussed object components such as faces and edges and vertices. And this sphere is no different. It has quite a few more than a cube does, or at least the base cube. But we can see it follows the same principles. A new concept I want to introduce to you in this video is edge loops. Pretty simple concept. An edge loop is a series of edges that complete a loop. So if we hold right click, drag up to our edge view. So we're now in edge selection mode. If we double click on an edge running latitudinally along this sphere, you can see it will select an entire edge loop. It's a series of edges that complete a loop. So now that we understand the basic idea behind edge loops, I'm going to show you how to select a face loop. Not sure if that's actually what this is called, but that's what I'm calling it because it makes sense to me. What we want to do here is end up selecting a series of faces in a loop between two edge loops, just like this. And the way that we can do that is by selecting a face within the loop, hold the Shift key, and double click an adjacent face. And it will select all of the faces between those two edge loops. Now, the reason why we're selecting this particular face loop is because we want to create a base for our potion bottle. It's entirely up to you how rounded you would like your base to be. So feel free to select any of these face loops below the center line of the sphere. I'm going to go this one here. And now that we have our face loop selected, we're just going to hit delete and delete it. Now, obviously, we're not going to leave our sphere like this. 3D printers have quite a hard time trying to print out objects that aren't complete. So the next thing we're going to do is double click on any face in this bottom section. We'll select all of it. Because these two groups of faces have been disconnected, if we double click on one of them or the other, it will select them individually if you are in face selection mode. So we're going to double click on any face in this bottom section to select all of it and delete that as well. Now we're going to introduce a new tool. First thing we're going to do is accept this autosave. First thing we're going to do is right click, go into our edge view, double click to select this edge loop, and we're going to extrude this edge. Up here on the tool shelf, this little icon here is the extrude tool. And if you can't find it on the shelf, we can go over to the edit mesh, drop down menu, and extrude is here. You can see the hotkey for extrude is Control E. I'd recommend trying to learn this one. I'll leave it up on the screen for you. The other thing that we can do is hold Control, Shift, and middle mouse click. And if you Control, Shift, middle mouse click on any of these functions that has a symbol in any of these menus, it will create a button on the tool shelf. So we've created another extrude button. Now, since I already have one on my shelf, I don't need this. So I'm just going to right click on it, delete it. But if you didn't already have that on your shelf, that's how you can put it there. So I'm just going to select my edge again because the tool won't work unless we have our edge selected. I'm going to Control E and it brings up a little set of controllers on the edge as well as this little pop-up window. For now, we don't need to worry about changing any of the values in this pop-up window. I'm just going to show you the controls of the extrude tool. We have what looks like the move controllers and the scale controllers combined because essentially that's what it is. If we grab this green arrow, you can see we're going to start extruding the edge downwards, or at least downwards in the axis that this tool has determined. You can see it's not the same as the world axis. The blue arrow brings it out this way. Funnily enough, for this extrude operation, we don't actually need to touch any of these controls because we're going to be merging all of these edges into a single vertex. So we're going to learn another tool. Up here on the toolbar, we have this icon. Looks a little bit like the Trivial Pursuit pies. Merge to center, which will merge all selected components to their center point. Since we know that edges are components, if we click this button, it will merge them all to their center point. Now, you might not have this icon on your toolbar. Again, we can put it there by going to our Edit Mesh menu, Merge to Center, Shift, Control, middle mouse to create that button on our tool shelf. And when we click on it, with our extruded edge selected, it's going to merge all of those edges into a single point. Right now, this is a little bit too pointy to be a base for our potion bottle, so we can simply grab the vertex and move it in one axis up a little bit so that we're looking nice and flat. Alrighty. So there we go. We have the base of our potion bottle done. For the neck of our potion bottle, we are going to select another face loop, delete it, delete the cap, right click, drag up to our edge selection, select an edge, Control E for extrude. Now, rather than using the controllers set out by the extrude tool, I'm actually going to hit W, which, as we know, the reason why I have chosen to go straight to the move tool rather than using the extrude tool controllers is that now I can simply drag this edge straight up rather than at an angle. I'm going to drag it up to about here for my bottle. Then we're going to hit R, which is our scale tool, and grab this planar controller in the XZ plane and scale this inwards a bit. Now, with our edge still selected, Control E again, W again, lift our edge up, hit R, scale our edge inwards, and as you can see, we're starting to look a little bit more bottle shaped. I'm going to go Control E again, hit W again, lift up. This time I'm not going to scale at all. I think I'm going to go all the way to the height that I want with this one. And then we're going to Control E, so we have an extruded edge on top of our existing edge, and click on our Merge to Center button. Now, yours may look a little different, but you might be able to see something that's going on here where we have a kind of smoothed out display for this base and a hardened faceted display for this upper section. Now, ideally, we want to see all the facets that an object has, especially for 3D printing, because that's the way the printer is going to print it out. So to get this entire object displaying the way we want it to, just going to click on the object to select it, mesh display menu, drop down to harden edge, and now we can see all of the facets of the object. And depending on how big or small we decide to print this out, it's going to preserve all of these facets. We're going to jump into our edge selection mode. I'm going to select this top edge and this bottom edge, and we're going to use another tool here called bevel. Again, if we don't have bevel, edit mesh, bevel, just Control B. If you want to use that hotkey, I'll leave it on the screen. Control Shift middle mouse to create a button if you don't have one. Anyway, we're going to click on that tool with our edges selected, and it's going to bevel those edges. Now, this is a little bit too much of a chamfer for me. So in our little pop-up window here, we can change this value, the fraction value, which will change the bevel amount. So I'm going to go with 0.3, I think. And that's looking quite nice to me. Now I'm going to introduce yet another tool. So up here on the shelf, we have the Insert Edge Loop tool. This tool basically creates edge loops on any surface where it is possible to create an edge loop. If you want this button on your shelf, it's actually in Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop. Okay, so we have our edge loop tool. We have our object selected. I'm going to double click on this button, which is going to bring up the tool settings for this tool. Now, the Insert Edge Loop tool settings, we have a few different things to go through here. However, for right now, we're just checking that relative distance from edge is selected. And when we left mouse click and drag on a surface that's between two other edge loops, we can create an edge loop anywhere in between. And I'm going to place one about here. And now I'm going to hit Q to jump out of that tool. As we know, Q turns off the tool that you have selected. Right click, go back into our face selection mode, and I'm going to select all of these faces above the new edge loop that I just created. And then I'm going to Control E to extrude that. I am going to use the default extruder controller this time. I'm going to grab this blue one, the arrow here, drag up, and that's going to extrude this entire selection that I've made. That looks pretty good to me. Hit Q, turn that tool off, go back to object mode. I'm not too happy with this lip here, so I'm going to go into edge selection, select this edge here, hit W, move this up, and there we go. I'm still not liking the size of this lip, so I'm going to go into vertex mode, select autosave, yep, select all these vertices on the top here, hit W, I'm going to drag them down to create a little bit of a smaller lip there. And that's looking pretty good now. The last thing I want to show you is how to subdivide a model. As I was saying earlier, we don't really want to see all these facets in the print when we print it out. We'd rather it be nice and smooth. So what we're going to do is select our object and select this tool up here called Smooth, which subdivides the object. As you can see, if we select the object to look at the mesh, the Smooth tool has added edge loops in between the ones that we already had and effectively makes the object look smoother than it was. Now, if we go to Mesh Display Harden Edge to get a better view of how it will look when we print it out, all of those facets are much smaller than they were before. I'm pretty happy with where this is at. The last thing that I might do here is go to this face loop up here, delete that, delete the cap, select this edge, extrude inwards by hitting Control E, and then I'm going to hit R. I'm going to grab this planar controller, bring it in to about here. Control E again for extrude, hit W, drag this up. Control E again, and close that off with our Merge to Center tool. And then I'm going to go into our edge view, select this edge, bevel it, change this to about 0.2, just to create a little cork on top of our potion bottle. Alrighty, so that's looking pretty good. That's about as far as I want to take it for this tutorial. So what I'm going to do now is File, Save Scene as Potion Bottle 1. And now we want to export this object so that we can bring it into our slicing software of choice. So I'm going to click on the object to select it. File, Export Selection. In this drop down, we're looking for OBJ export, which will export it as an OBJ file. And I like to export anything that's not a scene into the assets folder of my project, Maya project. So call this Potion Bottle 1 export. And now if you navigate to that folder on your computer, you'll be able to import that OBJ file into your slicing software of choice and print out a potion bottle that you made. So there you go. That is how we can turn the humble sphere into a potion bottle. We also learned how to use the smooth, extrude, bevel, merge to center, and insert edge loop tools. Join me in the next tutorial and we will make something from a cube. Thanks again for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.